Alright, this is the second part of Lesson 21. We're going to concentrate on the French Wars of Religion here. Calvinists in France were called Huguenots, possibly after Besançon-Hughes, a political and religious leader from Geneva. Your textbook claims that is the case, although from what I've read, there's an argument about whether or not that's true. Huguenots were under surveillance as early as the 1520s. This penciling sketch that you see here, this is a battle between Huguenots and Catholics. First wave of persecution. When Francis I, the King of France, is captured by Charles I of Spain at the Battle of Pavia. Now remember, Charles I of Spain is also Charles V of the Holy Roman Empire. That means France is going to be in a situation where it's going to want to get Francis I back. Their solution is, let's persecute the Huguenots. This will make Charles I of Spain, Charles V of the Holy Roman Empire, happier, and maybe he'll let us have our king back. The second wave of persecution. In 1534, Protestants are going to put up anti-Catholic propaganda on placards and cities, placard signs. Basically, this is going to elicit or create more persecution, including the exile of John Calvin to Geneva. He's going to go to Geneva and get things started there with spreading Calvinism. In 1540, the Edict of Fontainebleau is going to begin the Inquisition on Protestants in France. The Edict of Chateaubriand in 1551 is going to increase the repressive measures that are established with the Inquisition in 1540. This symbol you see here on the slide is the symbol of the Inquisition. Dynastic entanglements with the religious wars in France. Okay, this is where it's going to get kind of complicated. Henry II, King of France, will die soon after the end of the Habsburg-Valois Wars over Italy, and having accepted the Treaty of Cateau-Cambrésis, giving up any claim to Italy. Remember, Charles VIII of France invaded Renaissance Italy sometime before, and that started up these Habsburg-Valois Wars between essentially the family that controls the Holy Roman Empire, sometimes controls Spain, and the French kings. His young son Francis II, seen here in this painting, will become king with three families seeking to dominate him, and the poor kid doesn't really stand much of a chance. These three French families, the Guises, a Catholic powerhouse in eastern France. They are a branch of the House of Laurent, not particularly important for testing purposes. The Bourbons in the south and west of France, they're going to be pro-Protestant. So are the Montmorency Chatillons in the center of France. So you got basically two Protestant factions, one Catholic faction. The Guises, the Duke of Guise, will take hold of kind of dominating the king. They will basically be around the king all the time, real close to him, marry into the family. The Duke of Guise, to give you an idea of his Catholic pedigree, he has two cardinals for brothers. His niece is Mary Stuart, Queen of Scots. In which he's little, she lives in France, and her mother, Mary Guise, is going to kind of run the show up there. In the Amboise conspiracy in 1560. This was an attempt by the Huguenots to get to the king and to get rid of the Guise family's influence over the king. The Guises will find out about this. They'll kind of, lay in wait, which means wait, kind of ambush the ambushers, the conspirators, and the young king Francis II and his mother Catherine de Medici are going to be seeing the beheadings and the hangings of these Huguenot Protestant conspirators by the Guise. Why was Calvin, so popular with some in France? Well, he appealed to the aristocrats and the townspeople for a variety of reasons, and many of the reasons we've talked about before, the same reasons that Lutheranism was so popular in Germany. By 1561, 2,000 Huguenot congregations existed in France, but they were the majority only in the provinces of Dauphin and Languedoc. Only 1/15 of the actual population of France, or the overall population, that's something like 7%, a little under 7% of the population, were Calvinists, but about 40% or 2/5 of the aristocracy were Calvinists. So the question here is, why were aristocrats so interested in this? Well, for political reasons. Now, many aristocrats sought a French peace of Augsburg. And so aristocrats like the Prince of Caen found Calvinism was very useful for their political goals. They wanted more independence from the king. They wanted to have kind of that old kind of sense of independence that nobles and aristocrats had before the birth of these national states and these new monarchies that were being established with these new tools to tax, these new tools to exercise law, these more effective bureaucracies. And Calvinism kind of justified political resistance, which also means that it's going to protect Calvinism. So aristocrats use Calvinism for their political goals, and as a result they have a reason to protect Calvinists from persecution. So here we go, Catherine de Medici, the mom of all these, a lot of these kings that we'll be discussing here, and the Guises. She is the regent over her son, Charles IX. See, she's going to go through various kings of France through this process. She's going to try to reconcile Catholics and Protestants. It's not going to work. She's afraid of the Guises at a certain point, so she allies with the Protestants. She issues the January Edict in 1562 for religious toleration to worship publicly. And pay attention, because she's going to switch sides more than once. Well, we may not talk about all the time she switches sides, but the point is she's trying to play these guys off of each other. But the Duke of Guise, he's going to be aggressive. In March 1562, the Duke of Guise will massacre Protestants at Vassy, starting the French Wars of Religion. And the Prince of Conde, who's a Protestant, hesitates to march on the Guises. And the Queen Mother is there. She doesn't have a choice. She's basically within the grasp of the Guises. So now she switches over to the Guises. The Protestants don't back her up. She's going to go support them. And in the wars that follow, a Duke of Guise and the Prince of Conde will be killed. The Peace of Saint-Germain-en-Laye will end the Third War. The Crown will give Huguenots religious freedom in their own land and a right to fortify their cities. Kind of sounds a little bit like the Peace of Augsburg in Germany. A Catholic Catherine de Medici, remember she's Catholic, but she's still trying to balance these guys, the Guises and the Huguenots, off of each other. Why? Because she's afraid of the Guises. The Duke of Guise is pretty hardcore. If you haven't figured it out already, you will by the end of this presentation, assuming you haven't already read the text, which you were supposed to do. After peace, after this peace, the Peace of Saint-Germain-en-Laye, she's going to lean toward the Bourbon Huguenots. After all, the Prince of Conde is been killed, and Coligny will become a royal advisor. He's another one of these Protestants in the mix. But Catherine will secretly be plotting with the Guises. Coligny tries to persuade the king to support the Protestant Netherlands against Spain. Catherine knows this is an incredibly bad idea. The Battle of Lepanto's happened. She recognizes the power of the Spanish kingdom. This is kind of crazy. This is the Protestants that she's trying to ally with, not thinking like politiques, but thinking like these people who kind of want to push their religion above all things. So it's kind of interesting. A lot of the aristocrats are interested in Calvinism to further their political goals, but obviously some of them take it a little further than that, because if you've got a brain, you know not to take on the Spanish kingdom at this point. The St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre. Catherine will support this massacre out of a near panic. Coligny will have survived an assassination plot. She was probably a party to. It's not necessarily absolutely a sure thing. Your book assumes it is, and I would go with them on that. She convinced her son that a Huguenot coup was in place. There was a marriage going on. Henry of Navarre, a Bourbon, he's getting married, so there's a bunch of Huguenots coming to town, basically, and coming to Paris. And so she, kind of the way she shades it, she gives her son reasons to believe that, hey, they've come here to take over. And so on August 24th, 1572, you have the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre. Coligny and 3,000 Huguenots are going to be butchered in Paris, and then 20,000 more Huguenots will die in France after 3 days of planned attacks. Pope Gregory XIII and Philip II will be celebrating. They're ecstatic about this. France is back into a civil war, and Protestants now recognizing the scale of the violence here, they view this war now as a war for survival. All bets are off. Here we see the picture in better detail of the butchery in Paris by the Guise family, plotting with Catherine de' Medici. Catherine de' Medici being involved because she didn't want her son to try to take out Coligny. That's probably the case. Before the massacre, Protestants on resistance. This is in your book it talks about these various Protestants who justify political resistance, possibly rebellion. In 1530, Luther grudgingly approved resistance after the Diet of Augsburg. In 1550, the Magdeburg Lutherans published a defense of opposition to the emperor. I believe this is after Luther has died, and Luther didn't want any more bloodshed on his hands, so he didn't want to get involved in that kind of rhetoric. Calvin opposes rebellion, but he taught that lower magistrates, lower political leaders should oppose tyranny. John Knox is going to be a little more forceful here. He is pushing basically, he's mad because Mary, Queen of Scots, crushed his movement, his Calvinist movement, and of course Mary Tudor is Catholic. That's not going to make him happy either. He writes the first blast of the trumpet against the terrible regiment of women in 1558. It's kind of targeting Mary Tudor, but she dies. By the time he gets published, Elizabeth I comes in. Doesn't make her very happy, and he argues that it's the duty of basically any good person to remove a heathen tyrant. By this, in his way of thinking, Catholic. After the massacre, stronger arguments. 1573, Franco Gallia, a humanist argument that the Estates General had more authority than the king in France. 1574, Theodore Beza, kind of Calvin's right-hand man on the right of magistrates over their subjects. He justified the overthrow of tyrants by lower authorities, very in line with what Calvin had said. 1579, Mornay's defense of liberty against tyrants. Elites under a king, a duty to fight tyranny in any land. In other words, if you've got a tyrant king. The rise to power of Henry of Navarre. Henry III tried to be a politique. The Peace of Belleau, 1576. Huguenots almost got complete freedom. The Catholic League forced Henry III to end this peace. Protestants led by Henry are being led by Henry of Navarre, the guy who had the wedding at St. Bartholomew's Day massacre. The Catholic League with Spain dominates Paris. Henry III, the Day of Barricades, is attempted, but fails to rout the League. He's trying to get the Duke of Guise basically comes into town when he's told not to, and essentially there's a veiled threat there to Henry III. So he flees, and then he has the Duke and Cardinal of Guise assassinated. Another Guise will lead a response. He has to ally, Henry III has to ally with the Protestant Henry Navarre, and then a Dominican friar, upset about his alliance with the Protestant, kills him, which leads to Henry Navarre becoming Henry IV, the next king. Spanish attempt to replace him, it's going to fail. Spanish intervention angers many French people. Henry IV is charming, he's popular, he acts as a politique. In 1593, he publicly abandons Protestantism after a torturous consideration. Huguenots were horrified. After all, Paris is worth a mess, but the Huguenots are not happy. The Pope is skeptical. Tired France is going to rally around Henry IV, though. In 1596, the Catholic League is done. The wars are over. Here we see Henry IV as Hercules vanquishing the Lernaean Hydra, which is the Catholic League. This is painted by Toussaint L'Ouvreur, circa 1600. And if you don't know about Hercules and the Lernaean Hydra, that has to be one of his 12 labors, things he had to do to get the gods off his back, basically. The Edict of Nantes, 1591, Huguenots were already granted qualified religious freedoms, but in 1598, the Edict of Nantes recognizes minority rights in an officially Catholic country, the freedom of public worship, right to assembly, admission to public office and universities, permission to fortify towns, very important to protect them against, well, people like the Guise family. And this edict will begin a Cold War in France. By this time, there are over 1 million Huguenots. With every silver lining, though, there's a dark cloud. 1598 Treaty of Vervins ends the war with Spain, but a Catholic fanatic will assassinate Henry IV in 1610, and by 1685 Louis XIV will repeal the Edict of Nantes, causing more problems. But that's in a future chapter.